Hey, welcome to Draft Academy. My name is Mike. In this tutorial, I want to talk to you guys about using objects in JavaScript. An object is basically a collection in JavaScript where we can store a bunch of named values. Now, if you're familiar with arrays in JavaScript, an object is actually pretty similar to an array, although there are some key differences. So if I wanted to create an array inside of JavaScript, I could make a variable and we'll call it my array. And I could just give this a bunch of different values, right? So maybe this is actually let's call this fruits, and we'll store a bunch of fruits inside of here. So I could say apples, oranges, etc. Right? I'm storing different values inside of this one array structure. And an object has a similar goal, but with an object, we're not just storing values, we're storing name value pairs. So we're storing key value pairs. And so let me show you the difference. Let's create an object, and you'll kind of be able to wrap your head around what it's doing. I'm going to create an object called person. And this object will basically define some information about myself. So we'll make an object that will define information about me. And when we make an object, instead of using these square brackets, we're actually going to use curly brackets. So I'm going to make two curly brackets just like that, and open and closed. And a lot of times when you make an object, people will make a new line. And inside of this object, I can define key value pairs. So I can basically define different values and give names to those different values. So for example, if we're defining information about me, I could say name, and I'll say name, and I'm going to use this colon. And now after this colon, I can give this a value. So I can say Mike. And then we can define another attribute about me. We could say age, a colon, and I'm going to put a number in here, 23. We could say is male, and for me that's going to be true. And we could also say occupation, and I could say programmer. So what you'll notice here is I'm creating an object that has a bunch of different named values inside of it. So unlike an array where we created a container that just had a bunch of values, when we're creating an object, we're creating a container that has a bunch of names and values. So these would be key value pairs. And you'll hear people refer to that. They'll call these things key value pairs. And basically all that means is that we're defining a key, so a unique key, and then we're giving that a value. Now, one of the things with objects is you can't have two of these attributes. So this would be referred to as an attribute. You can't have two of these attributes with the same key. So I couldn't make another one down here with name. You can only have one. In other words, these can't be repeated. And you'll notice that I'm separating these using these commas. And then on the last one, I don't actually need a comma. So this is a good example of defining an object. And down here, I'm just going to put a semicolon to end this off. So I could make an object to store all types of information. I mean, obviously here I'm storing information about a person, but I could store, any type of information that you could think of. Now, the question becomes, how can we access the information inside of this object? Well, the easiest thing to do would just be to print it out to the screen. So I can say document.write, and we'll just print this out to the screen. So I'm just going to print out this person object just like that. So over here, when I refresh the page, you'll see that all that gets printed out is just this little object thing inside of these square brackets. And basically what this means is that we're printing out an entire object. So JavaScript is just telling us that we have an object here. Now, if I wanted to, I can access individual parts of this object. So let's say that I wanted to access the name inside of this object. What I can do is I can come down here and I can say person, and then I can say dot, and I can access that particular value by accessing it using the key. So I can say name. So remember, the key for this name attribute was just name. So if I say person.name, I'll be able to access the value of name. So over here, we'll just get Mike. I could also say person.age, and we'll get 23. I could access basically all of the attributes inside of this object. I could also modify any of these attributes. So I could come down here and I could say person.name is equal to Joe. And so now what this will do is it'll modify the name attribute inside of this person object, and it'll change it to Joe. So now if we access name, you'll see that it's going to be Joe instead of Mike. So we're actually able to update individual parts of that object just by accessing the specific attribute inside of the object. So that's kind of a basic overview of objects. And actually, if you've been following along with this course, up until now, we've actually been using different objects. So for example, if I was to create a string, so I'm just going to get rid of this person object. I'm going to make a variable called phrase, and I'll just set it equal to strings are cool. All right, so I have this string called phrase, and it's just strings are cool. This string is actually an object. So I can actually access certain information, certain attributes about this string. So if I was to come down here, obviously I can just like print out the string, but I can also access specific attributes about this string. So I can say phrase.length, and I'm accessing right now this length attribute. And what this will do is it'll tell me like how long the string is. So if you're using something like phrase, this is actually a object in itself. So there's a lot of these like little objects that are hidden throughout JavaScript that you might not realize are objects. I want to show you guys one more thing that you can do, which is you can actually put functions inside of these objects. So we're back here on this person object. So imagine I came down here. A lot of times what people will do inside of these objects is they'll put different functions inside of here. So for example, I could create a function inside of this object, and then I could call that function from outside of the object. So I'm gonna type out something here. We'll just call the function like print name. And what this will do is it'll just like print the name out onto the screen in some sort of way. So what I can say is function, and I'm gonna do my open and close parentheses and open and close curly brackets. Now inside here, I can just write a normal function. So maybe we would have this be like document.write, and we'll print out the name, but maybe we'll put it like inside of a header one or something. And this should be in parentheses. So now inside of here, I'll print out the name of that's inside of this object. And this is another thing that you can do is you can actually access attributes from inside the same object. So if I wanted to access the name, what I could do is I could come down here, and I'm just gonna put 2 plus signs, and I can say this.name. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna access the name from inside of this function. So this keyword this is basically referring to the current object. And so this.name is gonna refer to this name up here. So inside of this function, I'm writing out to the screen this.name. So I'm writing out the name inside of this function. So if I was to come down here, we can just call this. So I'll say person.printName. I can call this just like I would a normal function. This will print out this name. And actually, over here, I forgot to put a comma here. Just remember, don't forget that. So now, when I refresh the page, it's printing out the actual name from inside this object. And I could also pass this function like information. You can do everything that you would for a normal function, but I just want to show you like this is how you would access a attribute inside of this current object. So I could also access like isMail, and this would print out isMail value. So that's kind of a little tip, and don't be afraid to use functions inside of these objects. That's like a really common use case, is putting functions inside of here. So that's the basics of using objects in JavaScript. Hopefully you guys learned a little something about this, and you can go out and apply these objects to your JavaScript programming. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to Draft Academy to be the first to know when we release new content. Also, we're always looking to improve, so if you have any constructive criticism or questions or anything, leave a comment below. Finally, if you're enjoying Draft Academy and you want to help us grow, head over to draftacademy.com/contribute and invest in our future.